Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 30th of November, and we're going to end the month. Pretty exciting stuff. We had a nice bounce back here. Hit up against the ABM Yellow at 46.63, and we closed just below the Magenta there at 60. So that's going to be the threshold from above. Of course, we had before the 46.13, which was the previous positive extreme. So once it popped above that, it was clear sailing. It took a little bit of doing. From a MBI standpoint, we had a pop back over the Magenta, back over white, which justified that whole push. We're still looking at a DOC steel that's all the way down here, and that's bullish until it dips below that negative 13.5. This is what we kind of call that reset, but it's not uncommon that we've seen this after that. But you would need to see, for a short continuation, the MBI white pop back up and Magenta take a move back lower, or as soon as the Magenta makes a move lower down at this lower stage, it would certainly be the same effect. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. It's going to present itself on the 50K and 5Ks first. That we follow. From an NQ standpoint, much more bullish, stronger finished above the ABM Yellow. So that becomes that. And you can see that rejection right there. When we see that intraday, it's a clear sign for turnaround push to continue upward. So looks like the NASDAQ will lead the scenario. No real impact for gold, sort of a holding pattern. From that standpoint, Euro gave back a little bit as it seemed like there was stability in the U.S., even though it's considerably oversold. That is a positive for the Euro, with the Magenta moving above white as well as the red there. You had a rejection here on the DOC cyan to the green, still flat. So that's still going to keep it in check. I wouldn't expect it to do much. But again, seeing big money move back into bonds. So even though the open was much lower in anticipation of more scary stuff, as things became calmer, people moved right back into treasuries again in a significant way. So that's an indication that a lot of that free floating money that everyone was talking about has been going into safety, which is weird because the yield is negative by the time you take into account inflation and that. And oil, while popping up after that, gave back a lot of those gains in between. And it's going to take weeks of that to happen to mitigate the spike that took place. And of course, this is all based on concepts of the variant and lockdown stuff. And of course, Bitcoin. Big jump off that. We had the buy signal back down at the bottom of it after the short, and sure enough, that was a clean move, but it was pretty soft going through, and then a little bit later in the day caught a bit. Interesting thing about it is very tiny volume to get to make that big jump. When you look at it from a numeric standpoint, I mean, you're like less than 500 Bitcoins to see that kind of a move. It's interesting. Even though the volume was pretty decent, most of it was just pretty much flat after that point. And from an Ether standpoint, again, it's interesting because we can watch it trading live 24/7, even during the period that it's not reflecting on the chart, and you can see the buildup as it was going before it finally opened on the chart. And it held pretty well along that 76 until it got the same buy programs kicked in. It's pretty much the same point that they did for Bitcoin. Interestingly enough, that kind of coordination. From a 50K standpoint, we had that turnaround early on, and that was all from the Magenta riding above. And then when the dip came, critical point came right as the white was about to meet red, and Magenta pivoted up. Red pivoted and white didn't make a move, and that was the end of that story. Literally right there, we're around 46.35, and it was just boom, take off from there. But of course, fade off here, you still need to see white move back up stronger. Again, same setup we're seeing on the daily with the cyan DOC spread set up there where midterm buyers in that fade. So we might see a little more softness before that goes in there. It was another good volume day because you can see the pre-market, we were all the way over here before it even began. I mean, we've been looking at so many days prior to this where it was just all within one screenshot, but this was significantly more. So we ended up with some soft patches. It kept coming back up to the highs, but we'd established positive extremes there, marked down at the 46, and then further ones, and a bunch of those started getting filled, and then we just kept adding various ones along the way that we're just seeing modest retraces, but they were still worth a few points until later on in the day after the next series of spikes. We ended up with this one at right around the 34 range, and as soon as that signal came in, it filled that one beautifully, and then we literally just traded sideways across, and finally turned red right in here, and again, that was right around that 37, and that broke below it, and then we started to build, and once it turned green right there, that was off of red leading it, and that usually points to a lower move, which is why we had a couple of bars that were going lower, but as soon as the magenta pivoted up and white went below it, that signaled that it was going to continue to build some steam, and once it got to that 34, it held on, and it's about the exact same time we had the buy setups from Bitcoin and the others, so it was like all the algos kicked in pretty much at the exact same time. And it's always interesting when that happens in unison together. I think there's independence, but I think that kind of clearly shows not so much. And then once we did that, we started getting just a huge series of positive extremes, all from this 47 level. And fine, took the divergence with the cyan under red, and once that started to cave, the early ones that popped in originally, a little less strength from that because we're looking at MBI magenta here well over the 25, but once it got below, and then we started to see those same signals and a DOC spread popping in right there, that was the beginning of where it was starting to get interesting to be able to take advantage of the short setups. And then every time there was a little pop back, I was still looking for that same one, and then I was posting right about here, expecting that that we got that, but we might see a little bit of follow through. I mean, my expectation was that we would try and fill that bigger positive extreme, and that's exactly where they took it to, right on the money. Literally 47 and a quarter, and 47.50 was that low, so within one tick below it. It was perfect. And then a little bit of pop. Now see, this is where that red leading leads to the potential of that, but you've got to see magenta continue down and white move back above it for that to create a dip at this particular stage. You've got DOC green over cyan, and as long as that's the case, it's probably going to move back towards that 57, and we'll see if there's any softness in the reading at that point. But beautiful from our indicator standpoint, so all in all, that was spot on. No objections to it whatsoever. I'll be sending out the updates for December. In that, there's a couple of adjustments to the PNT2A right here, as well as the Opus 2T within that SH short setup. Changed a couple of the parameters within that. Still working with that one because it needs to capture some of those moves a little bit further and not enter right towards the bottoms, because it's pretty clear that we know that when we get kind of the setup, we're going to get it. So it's just a matter of putting in that language to get it to capture that just at the right spot. Pink bar's got it spot on there. As always, though, I will update you with relevant details, and you can look for that renewal. So we'll be all set for the first, which happens on Wednesday, so that everybody will have their updated indicators ready to rock and roll. As always, though, look for me on the Skype chat. Trade well. We'll talk again later.